Greetings to all of you, wherever you're listening from. I am Commander Bimal Raj, a TEDx speaker, internationally certified trainer and coach, mindset mentor, and a teen and parents coach. In this podcast, The Awkward Talks, I bring you topics that are usually considered taboo or are not discussed freely, but are some of the most pivotal things that we should be talking about. Happy New Year and welcome to the first episode of Awkward Talks for 2025. This is a podcast where we take deep dive into topics that people often shy away from discussing. I'm your host, Commander Bimal, and as always, I'm here to talk about the things that make us uncomfortable but need to be talked about. Interestingly, I came across a tweet after New Year, and the tweet said that Blinkit CEO posted that 1.2 lakh packets of condoms were delivered last night. Just for last night and just for Blinkit. Other e-commerce sites and market sales would be as high as 10 million. Good luck finding a virgin girl to marry in this generation. So today we are going to address this very topic, and it lies at the intersection of culture, morality, science, and personal choice. It's a subject shrouded in layers of taboo and more often than not misunderstood. It's about virginity and premarital sex in India. A friend of mine once joked that my extended family's honor seems to rest in my reproductive system. So this is a topic that carries immense weight in our society. It's something that influences relationships, self-esteem, family dynamics, and even public policies. But here's the thing. Most of what we know about it is steeped in myths, assumptions, and social conditioning rather than facts or even personal understanding. So you must be wondering, why should I listen to this? Why is it important? Let's consider this. When was the last time you or someone you know discussed virginity or premarital sex without fear or judgment? If the answer is never, that is exactly why this dialogue is needed. Not to tell you what is right or wrong, but to empower informed and respectful choices. For some, this silence leads to guilt and shame about natural desires. For others, it creates barriers in communication with their partners or families. Now, if we want to build a society that is empathetic, informed, and respectful, we need to start with these conversations, and not just in whispers behind closed doors, but out in the open with confidence and compassion. India is a land of contrasts, isn't it? On one hand, we have ancient texts like Kama Sutra that celebrate human sexuality as part of life. On the other, we carry deeply ingrained values about chastity and honor, especially when it comes to women. So let me start by looking at our roots, the ancient India. Well, in ancient India, sexuality was considered as an integral part of life, something to be understood, celebrated, and even mastered. Most of us think that Kama Sutra is just an adult guidebook, but Vatsyayana did not write a book about sex positions. It's a philosophical treatise on pleasure, relationships, and the art of living well. In fact, the Kama Sutra talks about sex as one of the 4 essential goals of life called Purusharthas. These are first dharma, which is duty or righteousness, then artha, prosperity or wealth, third is kama, pleasure or desire, and fourth is moksha, which is liberation or enlightenment. Now, if you noticed, kama or pleasure was seen as just as important as dharma or moksha. It wasn't sinful or shameful. It was a natural human pursuit. Sex wasn't just about reproduction. It was about connection, intimacy, and even spiritual growth. The Kama Sutra emphasizes mutual consent, communication, and the idea that both partners should derive pleasure. Think about how progressive that sounds even by today's standards. Well, then came the medieval shift, because during medieval times, the societal structures began to shift. Patriarchy became more entrenched, and women's sexuality started to be controlled. And a lot of this had to do with the growing importance of lineage and inheritance. Families, especially men, wanted to ensure that the children were legitimate so that property and wealth could be passed down securely. So virginity became a symbol of family honor, and premarital sex was increasingly stigmatized, especially for women. Then came the colonial era. When the British came to India, they brought with them the Victorian ideals of morality, ideas that were deeply conservative, rigid, and rooted in shame about sexuality. Virginity, chastity, and modesty were elevated to virtues, while open discussions about sex became taboo. Their influence was so strong that even after independence, Indian society retained many of these Victorian morals. Terms like Ru's character or fallen women, which are still used to shame women, stem directly from these colonial attitudes. Now let's talk about our India today, especially about the most obvious divide, the urban versus rural. In rural areas, traditional values still hold sway. Virginity, especially for women, is seen as a marker of family honor. The idea of exploring relationships or intimacy before marriage is considered taboo and is condemned. Now let's move to the cities, and urban India tells a very different story, or at least a more nuanced one. A 2021 survey found that about 33% of urban youth in India reported being in a premarital relationship, compared to less than 10% in rural areas. Even in cities, the stigma around premarital sex hasn't disappeared, it has just gone underground. The urban youth might not face the same direct social pressures as their rural counterparts, but they often grapple with the internalized guilt or fear of judgment. How many times have you heard someone say, "My parents will disown me if they found out"? Now let's talk about gender double standards. Now, if a man admits to having premarital sex, it's often brushed off with a laugh or even admiration. Boys will be boys, right? But if a woman does the same, she is labeled as loose or undesirable. Why? Because in our society, women's worth is still tied to their chastity. In a 2019 study, 76% of Indian men said they prefer to marry a virgin. That's 3 out of 4. Meanwhile, only 32% of Indian women said the same about their future partners. Men are often celebrated for their sexual conquests, while women are judged for even expressing interest in sex. It's a double standard so deeply ingrained that many of us don't even question it. Now let's talk about the media influence. If you want to understand how Indian society views relationships and sexuality, just look at Bollywood. For decades, Bollywood portrayed romance as something pure and innocent. Heroes wooed heroines with songs, and intimacy was left to imagination. You remember that two roses coming together? Yeah? And what about premarital sex? Those was reserved for villains or fallen women. But then came the 2000s and things began to change. Movies started portraying more realistic relationships. Sex wasn't a scandal anymore, it was just part of life. And then came the era of web series, which took things to a completely different level. Many shows today don't just talk about premarital sex, they explore it from feminist, LGBTQ+, and millennial perspectives. Media isn't just a reflection of society, it's also a driver for change. When young people see characters on screen navigating these issues with confidence, it starts to normalize those conversations even in real life. And let's not forget social media. Platforms like Instagram and YouTube have given young Indians a space to talk about relationships, consent, and sexual health like never before. Now let's look at medical and psychological insights. Now, much of what we believe about virginity and premarital sex is shaped by myths, misinformation, and societal pressures. These aren't just harmless ideas, they affect how we see ourselves, how we approach relationships, and even how we treat our bodies. Let's start with the biggest myth of all, the hymen. How many times have you heard this? If a woman's hymen is intact, she's a virgin. If it's not, she's not. This belief is so widespread that it's used to judge a woman's purity in everything from casual gossip to invasive virginity tests. But here is the truth. The hymen is not at all a reliable indicator of virginity. In fact, it was never meant to be. Medically speaking, the hymen is a thin membrane that partially covers the vaginal opening. It can stretch or tear due to many reasons: riding a bicycle, doing yoga, using tampons, or just natural activities like sports. For some women, it may never have been fully intact to begin with. In short, whether or not a hymen is intact tells you nothing about whether a woman has had sex. And yet, society continues to use this outdated idea as a marker of morality. Why are we so obsessed with the physical proof of something as personal as virginity? And why is this obsession only directed at women? Please understand that virginity is a social construct and not a medical one. Now let's look at why education is important, especially sexual education. One of the biggest gaps in our society is the lack of proper sexual health education. Think about it. How many of us grew up hearing vague warnings like "don't do anything wrong," but they rarely talk about what really wrong meant, right?
Without accurate information, young people are left to figure out things on their own and relying on unreliable sources like their friends or the internet, which can have serious consequences. Studies show that comprehensive sexual education, where people are taught not just about biology but also about consent, boundaries, and respect, they lead to better health outcomes. Countries with strong sexual health programs tend to have lower rates of teen pregnancies and STIs. This is proof that talking about sex doesn't encourage people to have it recklessly. It equips them to make safer and healthier choices. And what is the psychological impact? The stigma around premarital sex doesn't just affect our bodies, it affects our minds. Society often sends conflicting messages. On one hand, we are bombarded with media that glorifies relationships and physical intimacy. On the other, we are told that having sex before marriage is shameful, especially for women. What does this do to someone's mental health? For many, it creates a deep sense of guilt. People start to internalize the idea that their desires are dirty or wrong. They may feel unworthy of love or respect because they have broken the rules. These feelings are based on societal conditioning. Your worth isn't defined by your sexual choices. Whether you've had sex or haven't, it doesn't make you a better or worse than anyone else. The real question should not be, are you a virgin? It should be, are you at peace with your choices? And that is something only you can answer. So how do we move forward? First, we need to educate ourselves. Whether it's learning about sexual health, debunking myths, or understanding consent, knowledge is power. Second, we need to challenge societal norms. Let's stop judging people based on outdated ideas about virginity. Instead, let's focus on qualities that truly matter, like kindness, respect, integrity. And finally, let's normalize these conversations. Whether it's with your friends, your partner, or even your family, talking openly about these topics is the first step to breaking stigma. Remember, virginity isn't a badge of honor or a mark of shame. It's simply a personal choice. And your choices are valid as long as they are informed and consensual. Let us also look at the legal aspects. See, laws don't just reflect society, they shape it. And when it comes to sex, relationships, and consent, the legal framework tells us a lot about where we stand as a country. Let's talk about two critical aspects, the age of consent and the controversial topic of marital rape. Let's start with the question, how old should someone be to legally consent to sex? In India, the legal age of consent is 18 years. This means that anyone under 18 is considered incapable of giving consent, even if the relationship is consensual in reality. Here is an interesting fact. Up until 2012, the age of consent in India was 16. It was raised to 18 with the introduction of Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, or POCSO. The intent was noble, but in practice it had some unintended consequences. Imagine this, a 17-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl are in a consensual relationship. They're experimenting with intimacy like many teenagers do. If their families or neighbors find out, the boy can be charged under POCSO. Legally, he's treated as a criminal even though there's no exploitation involved. Did you know that under POCSO, even consensual sexting between minors can be classified as a crime? Yeah, that's right. Two teenagers sending private messages can technically land them in legal trouble. The law here creates a moral dilemma. On one hand, it aims to protect minors from abuse. On the other, it criminalizes natural adolescent behavior. Now let's talk about something that hits at the heart of societal norms, marital rape. In India, marital rape is not considered a crime. If a woman is forced to have sex by her husband without her consent, it is not recognized as rape under Indian law. Now, I've done an entire episode on marital rape. Please listen to it and you'll be shocked to listen to the information I've shared over there. Here is a question for you to think about. How do we balance protecting societal norms with safeguarding individual rights? And more importantly, what kind of society do we want to build for future generations? Imagine a world where young people can approach their parents without fear to discuss relationships, where schools teach not just biology but also consent, respect, and emotional well-being. Imagine families where love and support outweigh judgment, where choices are met with understanding instead of condemnation. We have the power to create that world, but it starts with us. It starts with you and me. Now, in conclusion, all I want to say is that let us turn the mirror inward for a moment. Ask yourself, What are my own beliefs and biases about virginity and premarital sex? Now, where do these beliefs come from? Are they rooted in my own values, or have I inherited them unquestioningly from society? And most importantly, ask yourself, do these beliefs allow space for empathy, understanding, and growth? It's okay to have questions and it's okay to feel uncomfortable. Change begins when we confront those uncomfortable truths and allow ourselves to think differently. Talk about these topics with your friends, your siblings, your parents, and your children. Yes, it might feel awkward at first. It's called awkward talks for a reason, guys. But these are the conversations that matter most. If you are a parent, think about how you can create an environment where your children feel safe to talk to you without fear or judgment. If you're an educator, consider how you can introduce these topics in ways that empower your students. And if you're a young adult navigating these issues yourself, know this: your choices are valid and your worth is not defined by societal labels. Together, we can reduce the stigma, and together we can create a culture of understanding and respect. If you like this topic and if it made sense to you, please don't forget to rate us a 5-star. And please click on the follow button so that you don't miss any of our episodes. Please do share with others if you feel that others can also gain from these conversations. This is Commander Bimal Raj, and I will be back with another episode very soon.